There we go. There we go. So, so what's one thing that people don't know about authors that you would like them to know?
Writing is not their strong suit. I'm just joking. But I think the most important thing people need to know is that you don't have to know everything, right? Like I wrote my book, The Tao of Self Confidence. I wrote it when I was 40. I had no writing background. I had to take English as a second language when I came to Canada as a kid. So English wasn't even my first language. I think when you just want to share your story, you'll find a way to do it. So for all those aspiring authors out there, like you can do it. Of course, you can take classes, you can learn from other people. But I think the most important is to start and just start messy, and you can always figure it out as you go.
Oh man, that's right up my alley. Me as a podcaster, unfortunately, my personality type is one that's like, "Ooh, this is cool," and then the follow through and stuff is usually what my wife does as
Hmm.
a producer, co-creator, and all that. And she has spoiled me. But our lives with four children, from ranging from ages 5 to 19,
Oh
has
wow.
just kind of pulled her away from this. And man, that's when you really, really start to understand her worth in all of this, because she's do my scheduling and everything, and these are things I'm trying to do on my own. So, and I'm so happy to see you here because, man, people do not understand. It has been a struggle, and I apologize for that, but I'm glad to see you here. All right, so I like to start with something silly. So here goes nothing. What do you get when you cross a writer with a deadline?
I have no clue.
A really clean house.
Ah,
All right, let's start the show. All right, all right. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to another week of the Urban Academia podcast. We are doing, of course, our book club series. I have with me, we always try to get an author on, Miss Chan. So it's always great to have the author, his or herself, be able to correct some things we got from the book, or to be able to better explain the book. So once you go ahead and introduce the people, and I'm gonna flip it on you, because for those of you out there, you may not realize, but she has a podcast as well, where she speaks with some powerful women. I just kind of went through the list, and I got in. I think I listened to 3 episodes. So I am gonna flip it on her just a little bit and ask her what's her cultural background, who she is, and why write.
awesome. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on with the show. So my name is Sheena Yapchan. I'm a keynote speaker, Wall Street Journal bestselling author, podcaster on the topic of building confidence in leadership. And for me, that was really important because growing up in Toronto, I never saw anybody that looked like me in the media. So I was always ashamed of who I was, and I didn't think I could even have a career like this. So that was one. Sorry, what was the other questions? I'm so sorry.
No, no, no. You're okay. You're okay. Just why you started writing, your cultural background.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so my cultural background is I'm Chinese Filipino. I was born in the Philippines. I moved to Toronto when I was 7. And that's how everything really started to the work that I'm doing right now. And why I started writing was because I knew I needed to share my story, give women, especially, being Asian, we're always told to stay quiet, never make any noise, just be in the background. And because of that, we're seen by our negative stereotypes. So I wanted to dismantle that. I wanted to create
Mhm.
more women leaders, more Asian women showing up, sharing their story. And of course, that goes beyond my culture. That's for every woman out there who feels that they've been silenced, they don't have a voice, their story doesn't matter. I want you to realize it does matter. And if I can write my story, share my book out there, you can too. I literally, for me, I believe that if it's really possible for me, it's really possible for you. Is it easy? Not always, but it's definitely worth the ride.
That is amazing. And this is one of those things we talk about on the show often is the perceptions of these labels we freely hand out to each other. So you said you moved to Canada, um, and English is not your first language. So how difficult is it to not just to master a second language, but to then have the gall to write in said language?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that I couldn't speak English. It was more like
Mhm.
the sentences I made didn't make sense. I would have people tell me, "What are you saying? That doesn't make sense. How are you putting those sentences together?" And that's why I had to take English as a second language when I was 7 because I had to learn to make sentences properly or else people might not understand what I was thinking. And when it came to writing this book, to be honest, I actually had a lot of imposter syndrome that I was going through. I was thinking I wasn't good enough. There's someone else who's better than me for it. And because of that, I never thought about writing a book because I mean, first of all, I've never in my wildest dreams think I would ever have a book that was that's from a traditional publisher, like a traditional old school publisher. Never thought that could
Mhm.
ever happen to me because it just wasn't something I thought would have like it just wasn't in my cards, right? Like I just didn't think it was in my cards. And so when this opportunity happened, I was a little bit scared, hesitant because I thought there's someone else out there who would do it better. But I realized if I'm someone who talks about representation and constantly showing up, then I had to do it even if I had no clue what I was doing, even if I didn't know what this book was going to be about, what the outline was, what the content was going to be about. I'll figure it out as I go. And I had less than 3 months to write it so that the book can come out on time.
Mhm.
I just decided to just go to the coffee shop and just start writing, right? Even though in my head, I'm like, "Does this make sense? Is this good? Will people like it?" Because we're human, we're gonna think like that. I kept going, right? And the best thing is that there's a team out there who will help you mold it so that sounds better, so it looks better, so that it flows better. So it's not like I'm the only one in this project. It's a whole team effort to give the best possible content out there so that people can get a transformation or just even be aware of some of the things that they're going through and what's really stopping them from moving forward to become their best self. Oh, you're mute.
Sorry. I used to work for the University of New Mexico, and one of the problems we came across were not having I guess, a good representation from the Asian community as a whole. So we've had people from, of course, South Korea, China, Japan, but they all seem to share that same way of going about things, which is be as quiet as possible, be noticed as least as possible, so you don't upset any sort of establishment or people. But with that came a lot of problems. Whenever they needed help or assistance, we almost had to, like, I discovered myself that I had to go and sort of create some sort of relationship with them before they would tell me, like, hey, there's a leak in our kitchen, you know, because I was a residential advisor, and those are the things we were looking for in our inspections of the apartments. So where does that come from? Like, how is it that so many that's a large region, Asia? How does that entire region seem to share that same cultural aspect of be seen, not heard, and kind of shrink self, so you can be free to pursue your goals?
I mean, of course, upbringing is really important. We've been taught one way of living. We've been taught to go to school, get a job, get married, never rock the boat, just do as you're told. And then historically, of course, men were preferred over women, just like in most cultures, right? Men are preferred over women. So women are second class to men. So, like in China, like you can have multiple wives and even concubines so that you can have more chances of having a son carrying the family name. In South Asia, like widowhood was prevalent. Like if you're a widow, you're basically an outcast to society, or arranged marriages is really prevalent. Um, you know, all these things has been throughout history that we never realized can really affect us until now. It's just been passed on from generation to generation. And so now that we're aware of it, we need to find ways to break that cycle. We have to realize what happened centuries ago does not have to happen now. and we can go out there and live life on our terms if we want to. Will it be easy? Definitely not. you know, there's going to be bumps ahead like always. That's every, when you're going out there doing something that's impactful and so needed, there's going to be bumps. Sometimes you'll take
Hmm.
2 steps forward, 3 steps back, right? You feel like I'm not making progress, but you are, because if you weren't making progress, there wouldn't be all these things happening in the way. Unfortunately, that's just life. So, yeah, I think that's really the most important. It's just how we've been taught to live, right, for so long, and it's just been passed on. Thinking that is a success to life. Don't rock the boat. Don't screw it up. Don't find any other way.
That's right. That's right. So, man, that's so interesting. I wrote down over here breaking cycles, and you were talking about building a good team. It's not just you. There's a whole team.
yeah.
How does one set first? I guess set the criteria for the team you're trying to build, and then how do you go along and actually go about the work of building it?
I think it's important to have a set of values that you live by. I think that's really important. And so that you know what you're looking for. And so when you're clear and you're intentional, I feel like sometimes the right people will come into your life. And of course, one thing as women, we really know when someone is good and someone is bad, but we tend to not use our gut instinct, right? We feel like, well, my gut instinct's telling me yes, but still think it's not a good idea. Or, like there's like this feeling that if you just head on that direction, something good will come out of it, even
Hmm.
if it doesn't look the way it looks in our head. So, and of course, we won't always get it right, especially if it's something that's new that you're doing. It's going to take a lot of practice. But I think as women, we do have that intuition, right? We do have that intuition knowing what's good and bad. And so learning to embrace that. And of course, there's other ways too, like doing your research, figuring out, asking for referrals, talking
Hmm.
to that person. Of course, all those factors are also important. But I think it's also learning to use our gut instinct is really important. And then, yeah, whatever that value may look like, what those hard values are for you, then you're going to attract the people who have similar values. So, I mean, everyone does things differently. This is how I do it, and so I'm
Right.
just showing you what works for me.
Man, that's great because you can apply that I guess template to a myriad of different industries. So that's really cool. So I'm looking at when you say breaking the cycle, right? It reminds me of this quote, which is more important, getting or letting go.
Mhm.
And so, what are some of the things you had to, I guess, sacrifice or let go of in order to pursue a life as an author?
Well, definitely my parents' approval. Not that they ever pressured me, but as an Asian
Yeah.
kid, like that's what you're told to do. They give you life. The only thing you need to do is everything they tell you to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you saw the movie Turning Red, that's exactly the line that the little girl said. And
Oh,
so sometimes if we don't get our parents' approval, we feel like a failure and we feel like we failed in life. And so for the longest time, I thought I was a constant failure because my parents didn't understand what I was doing, that I didn't do the normal route, what most people did. And so I thought I was just a failure. And I realized that, instead of me thinking that, I really just needed to let that go so that I can move on and start doing the work that I was meant to do. And so
right,
that was actually a lot of weight lifted off of me because I was like, okay, I'm not seeking approval anymore. And when we learn to unlearn those things, like it can be a huge thing. And we're not only seeking approval from our parents, right? Maybe we're seeking approval from people of influence or a sphere of influence or just our audience, whoever that may be. Like we also need to learn to let that approval go because sometimes we end up being paralyzed from taking action because we're so afraid of what other people might think of us.
wow. So when you say unlearn, there's some things you need to unlearn. Is could that be, I guess, compared to unlearning poor ideologies?
Yeah, I mean, just certain concepts or perspective that you thought, you knew all your life. You thought that was it, but really there's another way of doing things.
Right.
Like, I had to unlearn to seek their approval. I had to learn to let that go. I had to unlearn the negative habits that I had, or the negative thoughts that I had in my head, or learning, unlearning to overthink and instead just taking action, even if we make a mistake, right? Because I mean, there's no such thing as perfection. And that's what we've been taught. Like everything has to be perfect. But striving
Mm,
for perfection gets you nowhere. You're just going to delay everything because you're still trying to find that right moment. And really, there's no right moment. I mean, the world's a little bit chaotic right now. Now's the time to do it, right?
yeah.
And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, you correct it and just move on. And I know it's easier said than done. I get it. I've been there. I know what it's like. But the more we practice it, the better we get at it. And that's how we build the confidence.
That's how we build the confidence. Perfect segue. Let's get into the actual book. Correct me if I'm wrong. The goal of this book is to help people live their most authentic lives. Does that sound like a pretty good snapshot?
Yes, it's part of it. People don't realize that something holds them back from living their true self. And that thing that's holding them back could be the trauma that they experience. And sometimes people don't realize that the traumas they carry aren't even their own. It could be their parents, their grandparents. They say it goes down 4 generations deep, so intergenerational trauma. But I mean, coming from an Asian background, I feel like it's just deeper because of the things we've gone through in history.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's learning to be aware, what's something in our life that traumatized us that stops us from moving forward. Like one example I share is that, I failed kindergarten in the Philippines for coloring outside the lines. And because of that, I always thought I was a failure. I thought I was a failure at everything. Like anything I
Oh
touch, I was
wow.
like, oh, I'm going to fail. Forget it. I'm going to fail. And I didn't realize it stemmed from my childhood. And so, maybe there's something in your childhood that stopped you, or maybe later in life, or maybe there's trauma in your family that's basically being transferred to you that's stopping you. And so it's all about getting to the root cause, because I think that's really important, setting that foundation. Because if we don't know what we're doing, or if we don't know what's really stopping us, then it's just going to keep haunting us, right? And
Right.
then it's going to end up that trauma is going to control us versus us taking control of our life. I mean, we all go through trauma. Nobody ever talks about it. I mean, mental health became more normalized when the pandemic happened, but there's still a lot of people who are hurting. There's still a lot of people who aren't even ready to get back into the world after being locked down for how many years. And so how do we have these difficult conversations so we can find ways to heal it and really have that confidence? And healing from trauma is not pretty either. It's not going to be like rainbows and butterflies. It's going to be very ugly at times. And I think when we're more honest about that, people can know what people will know, like, oh, this is just part of the process. I just have to go through it. It's temporary. I'll get through it. So it's really more of like talking about the different traumas, talking about the issues that really stop us, and then how we can move forward with that through healing, self-love, self-confidence, to really show up as a leader.
That's amazing. It sounds like the peanut butter theory. All right, this is something I'm making up as I go. Okay, so bear with me. The idea that which came first, the chicken or the egg. You take that and apply it to which came first, peanut allergy or children with peanut allergies or nut allergies, or parents trying to protect their children and remove any contact with peanuts when they're younger, and that actually creating more people who have allergies, peanut or have nut allergies. So when you're talking about failure at kindergarten, and then that staying with you, my question is, how long did it stay with you, and what brought you out of that and started you along the path of self confidence?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, no problem. Sorry. Yeah, I'm a bit of a yammerer. I told you. Usually, my wife is my producer, and she's usually in the background, like, "Hey, wrap it up. Hey, quiet." So bear with me. No, so the question is, you coloring outside the lines in kindergarten
Yeah.
had a long term effect on how you viewed yourself. How long did that last? And when did you start to, like, I guess, almost forgive yourself for coloring outside the line and labeling yourself as, a failure?
Yeah, I mean, that happened in my mid 30s. I was at a personal development I was at a personal development seminar in Hawaii, and the person who was helping us going through it was telling us to kind of just like figure out what that time and moment that made you the way you are today, or is stopping you. And so that's when I
Mhm.
realized, like, me being 5 years old, failing kindergarten for coloring outside a line of a photo, really traumatized me because I had to redo kindergarten all over again. I had to move to another school. And so, of course, at 5, like, that's really traumatizing. And I didn't realize that me
Right.
coloring outside the lines wasn't even a sign of failure. It was really a sign for me that I was just meant to do something different outside the norm, outside the box, whatever that may be. And so after realizing that, I realized, like, oh, it wasn't failure. I was just always meant to do something different. And from then on, I look at failure as not the end of all end. Failure is just feedback. So many people have gone through failure, a lot of failure to get to where they are today. Even Michael Jordan, greatest basketball of all time, went through so much failure to be called that.
I love it. I love it. So, okay, that puts me right in line in step with you. Um, I like looking at people's biographies, auto and otherwise. And Thomas Edison's was very profound to me because one of his famous quotes is, "I have never failed. I simply found 10,000 ways that didn't work." And so I love that fresh take on it. Failure is feedback. Like once we start to change our perceptions of what failure is, then we react to it differently and probably in a healthier way. So that is really good. So you said that living your most authentic life is one aspect of the book. How would you expand on that definition?
Well, like I mentioned before, I mean, the book is about getting to the root cause as to what stops us from moving forward. And so trauma is something that we need to talk about that's not talked about enough, right? There's a lot of people out there who are hurting, right? And they have no outlet to talk about it, to even be aware that that trauma is stopping them from moving forward. So, in
Right.
order to live that authentic life, we have to go back, peel the layer, and realize what's the root cause and how can we fix it. So, setting that foundation so that it's easier for us to build confidence and move up and show up as our authentic self because we've done the work, whether it's good, bad, and ugly.
Perfect. Perfect. So you mentioned mental health, especially our awareness of it and how seriously we started to take it during the pandemic in 2020. Um, in keeping up with that, I always feel like you're you deal with things either voluntarily or you're forced to deal with them. And I felt like what was happening at such a clip that we were, as a country, as a world, forced to kind of really take a serious look at mental health. What are some advice you would give people who may be going through some sort of mental health issue, in order to combat that, to start to peel back those layers and get to the root cause and start to find a life in where they're not just simply surviving but thriving?
I mean, it's important to seek help and the right kind of help, of course, right? Like, it's really important to do that. We don't have to do everything ourselves because, I mean, it gets lonely out there, right? And why should we be doing things ourselves when there's someone out there who could help you, heal from it, right? Whether it's talking to a mental health therapist, talking to your friends and family, listening to a podcast, reading a book. I mean, you do what works for you. And you don't have to do everything at once. You can just take it step by step. Maybe today you just need to wake up and get out of bed. Then do that, right? There's some
Right.
people who just can't get out of bed because they're so depressed. And if you can wake up and get out of bed that day, like, give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself a high five, because that's one step forward towards your healing journey. Right? It can be as simple as that. And I know there's people out there who are really hurting. There's people out there who are going through, horrendous things, and everyone's different. So you have to do what works for you, and taking it step by step, right? I always tell people
Mhm.
Rome wasn't built in a day, so you can't expect yourself the same result, right? Like, it takes time. It takes time.
Right. And that's dangerous. That's a dangerous mindset to want to, you take 20 years dealing with an issue. You get to a point where you feel strong enough to seek the right type of help. And then you want to get all of it done in the next, 3 weeks. And it's like, this thing took 20 years to build, if not longer. Right. 20 years that you're aware of the problem. So yeah, giving yourself the grace, finding forgiveness in self in order to allow yourself the freedom to actually, seek help, the right help. I like that. The right help. Who's the arbiter of that? How do you know like that you get the right? Because I come from a impoverished neighborhood. So for me, I could see my problem, which is we definitely have a lack of resources. My mom was a single mom. I had two younger sisters. We definitely had a lack of resources. Well, how do I get it? Now, just outside my door were several what looked like solutions to the problem of we don't have enough money and resources. They seem to have a surplus, but they're, robbing, they're, dealing drugs, all kinds of negative things. So like, what do you tell, especially the young minds out there, what do you tell them as far as how to discern between what's the right help and what's the wrong help?
That's a great question, and it's such a it's complex, right? Because of the world we live in right now, what may seem like the right help isn't. And so, I mean, if you're questioning things, it's really important to ask the right questions to know that you're getting the results that you deserve. Um, I mean, if someone's taking advantage of you, you have to kind of like, you know, see, like, you kinda have to be a little bit open about it. That's why working on your mindset is really important, right? First of all, it's important to work on your mindset every single day so that when you are going through these things, you know what that right kinda help looks like for you, right? Whether it's, listening to interviews, reading books, listening to podcasts, there's no right or wrong way of doing it, but, I mean, the most important thing is working on ourselves first, working on our mindset so that we can see the red flags that might make us question a little bit, like, yeah, this person may be a certified person, but the things that's coming out of his mouth or her mouth doesn't make sense, or it doesn't really, it's not really in line with what I think it's supposed to be. So
Right.
um, yeah, question it, right? Like, start asking the right questions, or yeah, don't be afraid to be like, because this is for you, this is not for anybody else. So you really want to make sure that the right kind of help that you're looking for will benefit you instead of bringing you down.
Which means you got to tailor it and get out of the comparison Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, this person did this, they started walking every morning and now they seem better. So I'm going to start walking, because that frustration of, but I don't feel better, right? Why does it work for this person and not me? You haven't tailored your treatment to you. Yeah, that's incredible. All right. So another aspect of the book, three of the biggest ones that I found, I wanted to talk about. You want to empower readers for social expectations, to overcome social expectations, cultural conditioning, and personal insecurities. Let's talk about social expectations first. What are some scenarios in which you struggle with that, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is like how women are seen, right? Or if women are a certain age and they're not married, they're seen as an outcast. And like every person's different, not I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but like it's important to just have compassion and empathy for every single person. Just because they're over a certain age and they're single, there's nothing wrong with them, right? Maybe it's not their time yet, right? Things can happen late in life. And so as women, like whatever situation we're in, we should just honor each other and respect each other, right? As long as it's, of course, not hurting anybody, right? And
Right.
especially women at a certain age, we're always seen as like this, we've expired, thinking like, oh, it's too late to go out there and make your dreams come to life, or it's too late to start a hobby, it's too late to start a business, when really it's never too late. I mean, during the Paris Olympics, there was a 58-year-old woman who made her Olympic debut. 58
Hmm.
made her Olympic debut. So that's proof that there's no such thing as an expiry date. And as women, we can conquer anything, we can start anything if we really believe in it, right? Like I mentioned, when it came to my book, this book, The Tao of Self Confidence, I wrote at the age of 40, right? So anything's really possible when it comes to creating your dreams or making it happen. Like age is really nothing but a number.
Absolutely. Like, first of all, you wrote the book at 40. You don't look like you're anywhere near 40. So
I'm
congrats to you
older
on
than
that.
I'm older than 40 now, so
Well, that's what I mean. Like, it's just, I mean, apparently doing the work and, working on some mental health and working on some confidence and things of that nature leads you to have, I mean, I dare say, a less stressed life, or at least maybe if it's not less stress in your life than others, you have a way of dealing with it. It doesn't seem to affect you physically, because I don't see a bunch of wrinkles and a bunch of gray hairs and
oh, my back feels it, the aches and pains. But I like to maybe I think being Asian kind of helps. They always say Asian don't raisins, so that could be a
oh man, Asian don't raisin and black don't crack. That's amazing.
thing.
That's perfect. So some of the social expectations that from other people, what I have read up on your book, it doesn't seem to be like it's bashing men, but empowering women. How are you able to kind of, I guess, find the balance of that? Because there are plenty of times where people, like, hey, you live in America, so you shouldn't have any room to complain about anything ever. And it's like,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I'm in a great country, and I also have some notes about how we can improve some things, right?
yeah.
How do you balance that? I guess walk that line.
I don't know if there's a balance. I think, of course, yes, I'm grateful to be in Canada and North America and have those opportunities, but just we still go through a lot of biases, right? You look at me, I'm a woman, I'm Asian, it's like one look and it's like, well, I don't know if you're leadership material, or I don't know if you're this, or even if you
Right,
have an Asian name, it's like you're ignored because people are too lazy to pronounce your actual name. So, yes, we
right,
do have more opportunities, but at the same time, it's not the same as other people, right? And sometimes we have to work 10 times hard. And I get it, right? Like, I remember when I brought this up and people were saying I was complaining when I was just bringing awareness, right? Other people thought I was complaining, I was ungrateful,
right.
but it's like these are real life situations that women go through all the time, right? And if we don't talk about it, then we're at fault. But if we talk about it, then we complain. So there's no win-win situation. And it's like you just keep moving forward, right? You're always gonna have haters. That's part of the package, right? There's not everybody's gonna agree with what you do, right? But when you focus on the people that do agree with you and want that change, and you know, sometimes you have to have thick skin, unfortunately. And I know it's easier said than done because I still get triggered. I still go through PTSD when like I get a bad comment. I mean, we all go through it. I know it's easier said than done because sometimes there's just that one person who just really gets to you, and no matter how much work you've done that's been good, that one will always get to you, right? And that's normal because we're human.
Right. So, man, oftentimes on this show, I have the ladies come on and we talk a lot about the issues between men and women, most notably single men and women. And I just hear this long list of things that, that they have issues with, very real issues. And some of the comments were, I mean, awful. Well, you'll never find a man with that kind of attitude. And it's like, they're just laying out their struggles, right? There was a viral scenario that went out, and it was geared towards women. They said, "Which would you rather? You're lost in the forest. Would you rather come across a wild bear, fully grown wild bear, or a man you don't know?" And most women chose a wild bear over a man they don't know, which was just, it just blew my mind. And I could hear the men, gather the torches and pitchforks, and these women are out of control. And why would they? That makes no sense. But I took a different route, and I was just like, if that's their perception and that's what they feel, what is it about our own behavior that makes them feel that way? Right. And that's what I wanted to talk about versus, you know, these women don't understand how bears hunt, right? So, I mean, it was just incredible. So, to hear you talk about, you bringing up these issues to bring awareness, I'm assuming to find some viable, tangible, potential solutions to the problems that are very real. And you're met with, oh, you're ungrateful. Oh, you're just overcritical. Like how does one just get through all of that stuff to get to the one person who was like, I heard that and I could not articulate it. And you did that well. And now I know how to begin the work of fixing it, whether it's male or female.
I think it's important to have people who you surround with who have similar values because it can get lonely. And when you deal with things like that, then you have a second or third soundboard that can give you different perspectives or
Hmm.
solutions or just different information. You don't have to do everything by yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, especially as women. We tend to do everything by ourselves because we're considered like the superwoman and we have to do all things by ourselves. But really, that's just a myth, right? Like guys don't do that. Guys
Hmm.
will outsource everything, like literally everything, right? To get the job done. So I want women to be able to do the same thing, like be able to ask for help, be able to have a support system where they can have talk about these issues, a safe space so that they can learn how to deal with it and realize, even though you're going through this, just know you're not alone.
Right. And it's funny you said that about outsourcing. I am the king of outsourcing, where it could be anything. It's usually small stuff. Like my wife will ask me, like, hey, will you fix me a bowl of ice cream? And I'm texting one of my kids to take the ice cream out, let it thaw a little bit. I'm texting the other one to put it in the bowl. And I just walk in and grab it, And so I got caught doing that. She was like, what are you doing? I was like, getting you ice cream. She was like, you had everybody else do all the work.
Yeah.
And so my male brain was like, you wanted a thing. I
I
made it
found a
happen.
strategy to make
What's
yeah.
right? What's wrong with it? And she went into the whole, it's the ideal of you doing it for me. And so it's just so funny how it seems to me like communication, which is one of we humans' biggest antagonists, right? We are not very good at communicating. It's a lot of work to have accurate, thoughtful, heartfelt communication with each other because our lives are so fast paced. It's hard to really gear in and listen and, be okay with saying like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And the conversation needing to stop until the person agrees that that's what they're saying. So what are some of the ways that I guess you utilize or you showcase in the book to overcome miscommunications?
I think well, like having support systems is important so you can talk it out with someone and they can give you a
Hmm.
different perspective. Because sometimes we have a lot of blind spots. So of course they're called blind spots for a reason because we can't see it. But having a second or third pair of eyes to see that and correct it will help us out a lot better. So that's why it's
Hmm.
important to not do everything yourself. Have support, even if it means hiring a coach to help you with that. There's no shame in it. So
Right. So talk to me a little bit about cultural conditioning. What's happening in society that causes us to it kind of broadens the gap of miscommunication and how we view each other.
yeah, I mean, of course, like I mentioned, in Asian culture, women are seen as second class to men. So, of course, back in the day, if families had to choose between a son and a daughter to go to school, they would choose the son to go to school while the daughter has to stay home and do everything, right? Like my grandma had only went up to like sixth grade of schooling and then had to go back home and take care of all her siblings. And she had 11 siblings. And so, it starts there, like learning to not see women as second class, like we're all equals. And I know that's going to take a while because, we're dealing with years and years and years of tradition. But I think it's also important to question some of the traditions we have. It's like, why do we do it? Why? Right. And
Right.
especially if it hurts us, and I know sometimes we ask and they're like, because it's tradition, there's no real answers to why we do it. And just by saying because it's tradition is not enough. Like we have to figure out why we do this and does it make sense? And if it's hurting us, when we need to stop, right? Of course, there's certain traditions that are good. of course, right? That helps us, but the ones that doesn't, we it's really important to ask why we do the things we do.
It's something so disarming about approaching things with a question, right? So I'm sure you, as a community leader, have to find ways to circumvent that often, where you're like, okay, is this a time? Is this a situation where I need to be the teacher or the counselor who listens? Like you're trying to figure out what this person is actually seeking and where do you fit in. Sometimes I tell my kids all the time, because two of my four they have this thing where they freeze when they're afraid, right? Because I know it's like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? And so I told them, like, you can practice getting out of that by giving an answer. And sometimes your answer is, I don't know. Or let me get some time to think about that, right? Or can we put a pin in it and talk about it later? These are all options that are available to you. And so my job as a father, constantly trying to make sure to give my children as many options in whatever situation they're going through is very important. Very important. And we talk a lot of often about gender roles where tradition tells us that men do this, women do that. And then as industry changed from the farm industry, then we moved into more, automotive or factory productivity. And now we're moving into the tech sphere more and more. And I talked to somebody who I asked them about, AI and robots taking jobs from people and what can we do to keep them employed? And she had a perfect answer. She said, well, there are two types of companies. One company sees the change and tries to educate their workforce on the change, and then they make the appropriate, changes so, they stay employed and they're still producing well for the company. The other side is I'm just going to try to maximize profit and get rid of people where I can, replace them with or robots who don't need bathroom breaks or who get tired, right? And you can see in places like New Mexico, where I live, there's a place called Grants, New Mexico, and it was a huge coal plant, and they just never recovered. And those people, I talked to them today, and they are still waiting for the coal jobs to come back. And I talk to them often about, like, yeah, you're gonna have to find a way to educate yourself or get a trade where you're educated on 2024 standards and orders of operation. So that's kind of where it is. So are you finding the same thing is happening with gender roles? Like men do this, women do that, and then when the industry changes, right now you're seeing a lot of men who seem lost because I should work at a factory, bring home money. She takes care of the kids, and then when that gets disrupted, because that's not how industry is, and more women are entering to the workforce and in some very important roles, they seem to not know what to do with themselves, and it causes a lot of fear and anxiety. And as the saying goes, show me someone who's angry, and I'll show you someone who's afraid. So, are you finding the same, similar situations in your
I mean, yeah,
experience?
I think of course everyone is afraid, right? They think AI is gonna take over the world. I mean, no matter what happens, AI is here to stay. It's gonna evolve. But instead of fearing it, we should learn to embrace it, right? We have to find ways to monetize off of it, to make a living, to make a business. And I'm sure we
Right.
can, right? Just because something may seem threatening, it doesn't mean it's going to take over something. Like a great example is Uber. Everyone thought, oh, taxis are dead. No one's going to take a taxi anymore because Uber's here. You know what? Sometimes a taxi is way cheaper than Uber or Airbnb. Oh, no one's going to book hotels anymore. Airbnb is the cheaper option. No one's going to do that anymore. Guess what? People still book hotels, right? People prefer hotels over Airbnb. There's just more options, right? There's just more options to create a living, to make a living. And sometimes it could be a blessing in disguise, right? It's time for something different. It's time to learn new skills, and you're never too old to do that. And so it's learning to go with what's happening now, right? And yeah, it's frustrating, it's confusing. You don't know half the things that's going on, you don't know these terms, but I believe that you have what it takes to learn it, apply it, and do something with it. So I like to think of coming out of abundance versus scarcity because there's so much like there's just so much bad news in the world, like, we need something good,
Yes.
right? We need to look at things from a different perspective. No matter how insane it might look right now with what's going on, like, there has to be some good. And it's not being delusional, it's just, like, seeing things differently. Focusing on the different things. I'm not saying ignore the bad stuff, but it's like if we can focus on creating something good, imagine how much it can help other people out there and really eliminate the bad things that's happening.
Absolutely. Man, that is so incredible. That is so incredible. So for you, what is and I want to ask you this question. It's The Tao of Self-Confidence is the book. I'm with author Sheena Yap Chan. Um how much of because the yin yang sign or the yin yang, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Is that part of the Tao? Is that a Taoist symbol?
To be honest, the word Tao for me was, of course, it comes from the Taoism philosophy. And I just like the meaning of it, which means the way. So it's just the way to self confidence. And
Oh,
everyone's way is different because we're all different. We're going to build different ways of doing it. This is my way that I'm showing, and people can always add or take out different things because their way of building confidence will not be the same as mine. Because I used to think there was only
right.
one way of building it, not really realizing there's different ways. That's why I've interviewed so many women on the podcast because you can find different ways and you can apply one of those to your own journey.
Absolutely. Again, I'm with the author of The Tao of Self Confidence. That's so interesting. I would have never known that. So Tao is the way.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's cool. Do you only interview women on your podcast?
Yes.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. And you have over 900 episodes,
Episodes.
901 episodes, I believe.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. So for the people out there who are like, yeah, but that's Sheena is more of an outlier, right? But you have right now sitting on your podcast 901 stories from women, and each of them seem very personable, and very authentic. So it's hard to deny that. But that's pretty cool. I went straight to the tower symbol because of the ideal of order and chaos and the line in between it that we all have to sort of walk through. What's one of your, besides being a failure in kindergarten, what's one of your biggest, I guess, personal insecurities, and how did you work through it?
I mean, imposter syndrome, right? Like we always think we're not good enough. We feel like a fraud. And sometimes we have to realize we're in this position for a reason. There's someone out there who sees your potential. So if they can see it, why can't you? So
Absolutely. And what did you do? Like, what are some of the tangible steps that you took to get over that?
Um, I mean, that's why talking to other people is really important because when you can see it in their eyes how much they believe in you, it's just like, "Oh my gosh, like I didn't know, someone believes this much in me." And I also had in the book some practical exercises that they can use, like self-love is really important, learning to love yourself unconditionally. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's so important. So, there's
Mhm.
like a whole chapter in the book that talks about that.
Amazing. How much of this book can men also find the value in, even though this is primarily with your podcast?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think any person can find value from it. Of course, we're gonna have similar things we go through, similar feelings. We can relate to it. Like, I don't look at Tony Robbins and be like, well, can Tony Robbins relate to a woman? We just assume, right?
right.
Because, he's Tony Robbins. Well, as I can also relate to other people. I can also relate to people outside my culture, outside my gender. So uh every person who's read this, they said they found value, they've related to it, regardless of that. So
That's amazing. That's Miss Sheena Yap Chan. You can, it's got it right there. There's her website, SheenaYapChan.com. That'll be in the description, as well as the link to your book and audiobook, as well as the link to your podcast. Any other projects or anything you like to promote? And I'll give you one final word. And of course, you want to shout out one of your favorite podcasts, Urban Academia.
yes, make sure to subscribe to Urban Academia. I do have a second book coming out, so it's available for pre-order on Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, and other book retailers. So you can just check it out. Just search for my name, you'll see it, or I'll send the link as well. And yeah, that's about it.
That's perfect. Thank you. Oh, where can they find you on social media? Or
Yeah,
does he, if you go to the website, it connects you to everything?
yeah. So you can just search. So the easiest thing I tell people is that if you search my name, Sheena Yapchan, I'm the only Sheena Yapchan on the internet. So all my socials will come up. If you go to my website, one of the things I also offer is a free quiz to check out your self confidence personality. So
Ooh.
there's a couple questions, you get the results right away. You also gets emailed to you. But yeah, when it comes to social media, just search my name, Google my name, Sheena Yapchan, and you'll get all the links.
Oh man, I wish I'd have known that. I would have taken it before. I might have to find a way to just splice that in at the end, and so we can see my results. But that was Sheena Yap Chan. Of course, I'm your host, Jay Zilla. This has been another episode of Urban Academia. I'm going to take you off the screen right now, but please do not log off. I'm just going to finish up with the audience here, and then I'll be back to bug you afterwards. So that was Miss Sheena Yap Chan. Again, you can get her book Amazon and just about anywhere. Audible. It's a the audio version of it, and of course her podcast. I know I found it on Spotify. It's also on Amazon. So feel free to check that out. But man, we love to do this with authors because that's a way better job of going through her book than just me alone. She talked about building a team, and one of the main criteria is values. What are their values? And that's how you start to build your team, which also means you kind of have to sacrifice people who don't share your values, right? With no sort of, ill will towards them, but you're headed somewhere that they may not be headed. Breaking the cycles, learning to unlearn poor ideologies, living authentically, right? Going about those negative habits and how to get rid of them, how to drop your trauma. On this show, we always say, leave the pain behind, but extract the wisdom from your past experiences. That's easier said than done, but it's super valuable if you do it. Get to the root cause. That's a big one for me. I wrote that down and underlined it two times. Um, Understanding that failure is feedback and seeking the right kind of help will help you with social expectations, cultural conditioning, personal insecurities, and that'll get you to a more authentic life. Those are all wonderful things. Go read the book, please, 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 and comment on this video. If you come across this video and you haven't read the book, that's all right because things live forever on the internet. So go read the book and then come back and enjoy the interview with the author herself. I want to thank her for coming on. Go check her out. And as we say, common sense is not common. Or as my friend says, common sense ain't coming. So join us each week as we try to help each other obtain a little bit more. So we're not just simply surviving, but thriving. Till next week. Peace. For you.